Aengus Kennedy from Nature Northwest. Aengus, Happy New Year to you. Good to see you again.
Happy New Year, John. It's an optimistic kind of day. It's bright out there, and that huge change in temperature. There's nice sunshine. Everything's a little bit warmer. You can hear a good few birds singing.
But whatever the weather, you're always looking around for different signs, and wildlife doing different things. So the weather's probably secondary for you.
Well, to a large extent, or at least the different weather brings different things, So very different kind of birds, different growing seasons, different patterns. But one of the things that's interesting, weather and the changes in our seasons, is how some plants and some animals react. And sometimes they react a little bit too early. Others are kind of holding their peace. And you can hear that with some of the birds. And people would have noticed this morning when they were heading out, it was quite a few birds singing. But it's way too early for breeding season yet. Okay. Or you might notice in some of the hedgerows, the little hazel flowers are out. It's a little early,
Nature, wildlife's dependent on the weather the same as the rest of us.
Yeah, very much so. And a lot of these things, they're triggered by light, but they're also triggered by temperature. Yeah. So the warmer it gets, and if we suddenly get a lovely warm, unseasonably warm blast, well, that can trick a lot of things into waking up.
Caller says, I'm seeing buzzards more often now. They still unnerve me a bit. Should I be worried? I live in Glenswilly. Well, birds of prey, I suppose they are a wee bit unnerving, and especially if you're a farmer. Buzzards, should farmers be worried, concerned?
No, quite the opposite. They should be celebrating them. Really, they're a fantastic thing to have. But they are unnerving looking creatures, and they're big, sizable. A buzzard has a wingspan of about 4 foot, over a metre. And standing up, it's nearly 2 foot tall if you're holding one in your hand, or not far off that. And they're a big creature, and they make that unerring calling sound, that kind of screeching sound that we can hear. Actually, I might play it now. But they're definitely not a threat to us. That's the most important thing to do. They're not a threat to you, to your pets, to livestock, to any of that. In fact, they're a wonderful thing to have. Yeah.
Okay. So, that's the sound there.
That's the sound. That's the sound of the buzzard. You might be able to see it on there.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And when they're in full flight, I mean, how do we? I've seen buzzards in the past, and they don't tend to flap their wings that much, and they're a sight to behold because they're so big. And how do we? Is it the underbelly that they're recognizable from, or is it the distinctive tips to their wings?
Yeah, the shape of them is the easiest way to kind of get your head into it, because their colours are very variable. They're quite brown, but they can be pale as well, and the younger ones tend to be a little bit paler again. So you can have buzzards that are nearly half white under the wings, or ones that are nearly fully brown. But it's the size, first, that big bird, the fact that they have what looks like fingers sticking out, those extra feathers that stick out, very eagle-like. So your image of an eagle in your mind is like a small version of that.
Easy enough to get them confused with an eagle.
Absolutely. And in fact, when the Golden Eagle project came about in Donegal, people were sighting what they thought were eagles all the time, but they were buzzards. Well, when you see a golden eagle, you know just the sheer size and scale. It's a different beast altogether. But the buzzard itself is very eagle-like, and it's big. And you're right, it tends to do that gliding thing on those huge, broad wings.
And they're not a threat to live animals.
No,
so
what
do they feed on then?
So they're scavengers first and foremost. So there's something dead by the roadside or whatever else, they'll come and take it. They're after rodents is probably their main source. But then they'll hassle the crows. So at this time of year, especially now that we're starting to just the very beginning of the hints of breeding season, you'll see some crows flying around with sticks in their mouth now over the next few weeks. And they'll be chasing the buzzards, because the buzzards will take their chicks out of their nests.
So they are good things for farmers. They're a good bird to see around.
They're natural pest control. Absolutely, they're a great thing to have. Yeah. So the rats, the rabbits, the mice, any other little rodents like that that you don't want, they'll sometimes take worms. You'll often see them perched, and it's interesting. Your listener saying they saw one yesterday. I saw one yesterday on the way back up from Dublin, right on the side of the M1, just watching, because there's that nice wild strip along the edge of the M1, and it'll be looking for anything kind of rustling or moving, and it'll dive down onto it. I saw two this morning, and just after dropping the kids off onto their school bus, there was two of them shouting away at each other because they're establishing their breeding bond at this time of year, and they're chasing off any other would-be rivals.
Are their numbers on the increase?
Their numbers are on the increase, yeah. They're a good news story. I think the bird that has increased most out of any bird in Ireland, or certainly the thereabouts. They're up there, and we hear so many stories of biodiversity in trouble, or nature in trouble. Buzzards are one of the signs that if we do the right thing and we look after nature in the right way, we can have room for both us and nature. Buzzards were wiped out, like so many birds of prey, over 100 years ago in Ireland, because they were seen as a threat for various different ways. But they started making a comeback. One pair came on their own into the north back in the 1920s, or 100 years ago, and they started spreading and spreading and spreading, but they couldn't come down south of the border. And the reason they couldn't do that is because we still allowed a poison called strychnine. And people might remember strychnine was banned in 1991, but it was a controversial thing at the time because it was a very powerful, very effective poison. But of course, it poisoned everything. And the poison itself leached down into the ground, and whatever was eating or predating on the fox or the rat or whatever was targeted was getting killed as well. So once we banned that one chemical, buzzards started to get a foothold, and now they've spread and spread and spread, and you'll find them in most parts of the country.
Okay. All right, moving from buzzards, I came across a family of grey seals last year in a sea cave on Gola. I was worried then that I had disturbed them. Grey seals, how many types of seals are there around the coast?
Yeah, well, there's about 30 around the world, and we have two. We have two main types, apart from that famous walrus that turned up. I remember that a year or two ago. But no, we've two seals. We've the common or harbour seal, as it's often called. That's slightly smaller.
Right.
And then we've the grey seal, and the grey seal is the huge, big one.
Okay. And we have them off the coast here.
Very common,
as well.
Very common. There are thousands off the coast. Yeah, ask anybody involved in fishing, anybody involved in boats. You'll come across them a lot. You can ask our sea swimmers. Our sea swimmers will often see them. Just the other day, or a couple of weeks ago over Christmas, I was going for a walk in Rathmullen, and there was very, very brave souls swimming with no wetsuits. But as they came out, just a few metres off the beach, was this huge head, an enormous head. It's the size of a basketball, and it was just sitting there watching all the swimmers heading out. No danger to them, no, not an issue in that way. But curious.
But like the buzzards, are they any danger to us? Because they'd be fairly big and intimidating, especially if you're out swimming.
They're the size of a cow. A big bull grey seal is the size of, if you imagine, a big dairy cow. So it's a big beast, and incredibly agile in the water. As you see them on land, they're clumsy kind of thing. But no, they're no threat to humans whatsoever. You don't go over and disturb them, but they're no threat. And all this rise of swimming that we've had, and other water sports around the coast, seals haven't been an issue.
And is that where they breed, in sea caves, or is it out in the open more?
You'll get the harbour seals or the common seals more on sea caves and more in estuaries. So you'll get them on little rocky islands on the likes of Lough Swilly. But the grey seal is an incredible creature. It will breed on those rocky beaches, those kind of bouldery, shingly beaches that we'll have. Might be at the bottom of Sleegleague Cliffs, might be at the bottom of Horn Head, in very remote, hard to access places.
Right.
And they give birth to a pup in October or November, and they feed them for about 3 weeks. And then they abandon them. They immediately breed. The males are hanging around at that time as well, and they breed, and then off they go. And then the pup, after being fed its mother's milk for about 3 weeks, is left to its own devices. It hasn't figured out how to swim, never mind how to catch fish, never mind how to survive. Incredible, isn't it? As a result, there's around about a 50% mortality rate. So a lot of them don't survive. You'll see these very white, very cute, fluffy-looking balls of blubber, because the milk that that seals, all the seal family produce, is the richest milk in the world for fats. Human milk or cow milk is about 4 or 5% fat content, I think. In fact, that's something that a lot of dairy farmers know all about, because in some parts of the world you get paid for the fat content, and that's a very important part of it. Whereas grey seal, the fat content is 50%.
Oh, wow.
So these tiny little balls of existence grow to a massive size of blubber in about 3 weeks, and they have to be able to have all that blubber to survive our cold sea, to survive all the temperatures while they're learning and figuring out how to hunt.
Might sound like a silly question, but are grey seals all grey?
Well, they start off, and it's a good question, because they start off white, and there's a theory that that's a hangover, because these creatures, of course, coastal creatures, have been around for a very, very long time in Ireland. So they think that's from when the ice was here, an adaptation for the pups, so they wouldn't be vulnerable, because they're stranded on that rocky shore for those first couple of weeks. But once all that white, fluffy fur has worn off, The grey, the tougher grey colour underneath, kind of mottled grey, is there, and that's the colour they stay then.
And what do they feed on? Any fish, or are they fussy? Is there a particular type of fish that they prefer?
Yeah, well, I remember one amazing time seeing them down in Kinniger. So the tide was high in Kinniger, and anybody who's familiar with Kinniger Beach, just north of Rathmullen on the Swilly, it's quite shallow when the tide is in. So you could see the seal very clearly because the water was as clear, and it was biting into the oyster. The hinge of the oyster shells. So those big long oysters that attach themselves to rocks, with its tough teeth, it was able to crack in at the little hinge, which was able to break it, and then peel open the oyster and eat up the meat inside. And it was taking another and another and another. But they can dive down up to 70 metres if they want. And they'll hunt fish, they'll hunt shellfish, they'll hunt anything they can get their hands on. Yeah.
Okay. And finally, now is the time to apply if you want to create what's called a Hare's Corner. Now, there might be some funding available for this, but first of all, explain what a Hare's Corner is.
Yeah, it is a lovely initiative by the Burren Bio Trust. A wonderful gang based down in the Burren, of course, and they have a great track record. I've been involved, and I've come across different projects they've done in the past, and they always do them well. The concept of the Hare's Corner was that up until more recent times, with our machines and efficiencies and the rest, we always would have left a corner. It might have been left because it was just difficult to get the earlier machines into, or difficult to plough, or whatever else. Or quite often people would have just left room and had that little bit of space for nature.
Now, this isn't in our gardens, this is more out in farmland. And so
It could be anywhere. It could be the farmland, it could be the side of your church, it could be the size of a little corner in your school ground. And that's exactly what these guys are targeting. It's not just farmers can apply, of course. But it can be anybody, everybody. They're looking for school groups, community groups, anybody who wants. They're small little grants, but the best bit about them is they come with an advisor as well. So somebody comes out and helps you figure out what's the right thing for your land, and then there's a menu of different options that you can apply for.
Okay. So the cost is minimal, and they'll advise as to the most economical way to do it. But just to suppose it's the advice will be appropriate to your corner or your bit or the size or whatever it is.
Yeah, and it's trying to create this network, because nature, one of the big problems of nature is habitat fragmentation, is the fancy term that they use. In other words, the space where different things live gets broken up, and the corridors in between those spaces gets broken up between our roads and our development and the rest of it. And if we can all create little networks, we all have little patches that are good for our pollinating insects, a place for the hare to hide, the corner of the hare to hide, a place for the birds to be able to nest. And if each and every one of us has little corners like that, that hugely increases the biodiversity value. Yeah. So Donegal County Council have taken this on, and Julie Corrie, our biodiversity officer, she will be helping manage this locally, and then there's a bunch of advisors will be out there. So look it up. It's only until the end of this week. I think it's Sundays the applications finish, the 18th. The applications close. It's an easy application to do for your school, for your group. And you'll see the different options that are there, be it if you want to plant a small hedge, a little mini orchard, or maybe just have a plan for nature. Somebody will be able to come and give you that too.
All right, so it sounds easy enough, and it's great to know there's a bit of help there if you decide to move forward. You're just not sure as to how to go about it.
Yeah, and it is one of the best things, the Hare's Corners, because a difficult thing for these kind of projects is to simplify them as much as possible and make them as accessible as possible. And these guys have done a good job of that, I think.
Okay, so it's the harescorner.ie for more information.
Harescorner.ie.
Or would you get info as well on the council website?
You will indeed, yeah. And the council are promoting this heavily at the moment, because it's a great initiative that they're involved in.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Aengus.
Super.